Organization Working Group meeting. Before we begin the meeting, I'd like to ask Jane Clough, who's serving as our clerk today, to confirm if we have a quorum. Jane?
Yes, we do have a quorum.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. I'd like to review the process for both the working group members as well as members of the public who wish to speak under public comment. For working group members, when you would like to speak, please click on the raised hand icon in the Zoom control panel. You have control of your video and mute, so please turn on your camera and that will indicate to us that you would like to speak. And I will absolutely call on you. Does anybody have any questions before we continue? Okay, wonderful. Jane, can you provide a quick reminder of how the public comments will work?
Yes, as noted on the cover page of today's meeting agenda, in addition to emailed comments, the public also may provide live comments during today's meeting. To provide a live verbal comment during the meeting, please join this Zoom meeting either by computer or phone. At the time for public comments, members of the public are advised to raise your hand if you wish to provide comments. The raise hand feature can be found on the Zoom toolbar for those who are joining via computer and by entering *9 for those joining via telephone only. The chair will call on members of the public by name of those joining via computer and by the last 3 digits of your telephone number for those joining via telephone. All comments received prior to the close of the meeting will be made part of the meeting record. The instructions for providing live comments also are on the bottom of your cover page of today's meeting agenda, which can be accessed from the homepage of SANDAG's website at www.sandag.org. Thank you, Chair.
Wonderful. And now I'd like to take this opportunity for our community-based organization members to introduce themselves and also the area of the region they serve so that the public joining us today are aware. If you guys just want to go ahead and introduce yourself, I'd appreciate it. Let's start with Carol.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Carol Lewis. I'm with the City of El Cajon and represent East Region.
Wonderful. Craig?
Yes, good morning. Craig Jones with the Alliance for Regional Solutions. We represent North San Diego County.
Thank you. Erica, Miss Erica Leary?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Erica Leary. I'm with Vista Community Clinic, representing communities of Oceanside and Vista in North County.
Thank you. Miss Elizabeth Liu? Oh, you're on mute.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Liu. I'm with Nile Sisters Development Initiative, serving the Greater San Diego and Los Angeles.
Wonderful. Thank you. Next up, I have Stephanie.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Stephanie with City Heights CDC, representing City Heights area.
Thank you. Miss Rosina Lizárraga.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Rosina Lizárraga, representing National City and South Bay areas.
Thank you. Claire Grobner.
Hi there, Claire Grubner, also with Olivewood Gardens and Learning Center, representing National City and South Bay.
Thank you. Miss Rosa Ceballos.
Good morning. Rose Ceballos with Bayside Community Center, representing Linda Vista.
Thank you. And now Lisa Cuestas.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Lisa Cuestas with Casa Familiar, representing San Isidro.
Thank you so much. Miss Brenda Lee Rodriguez.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Brenda Lee Rodriguez from the Chula Vista Community Collaborative, South Bay.
Wonderful. Mr. Barry Pollard.
Good morning. From the Urban Collaborative Project, we represent Southeast San Diego.
That's everybody.
This is Feth Seligman with Samahan Health Centers, representing National City in the South Bay region.
Wonderful. Get everybody on the phone. Is anybody else still lingering on the phone that we might have just jumped on?
Yeah, this is Azucena Lopez de Nava from Chula Vista Community Collaborative, South Bay.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Good morning. My name is Ana Ardon with the National Latino Research Center at Cal State San Marcos, representing North San Diego County.
Wonderful. And I saw Randy. If you'd like
everyone, sorry about that. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, my name is Randy Torres Van Vleck. I'm the Director of Policy and Planning at the City Heights CDC.
Thank you so much. Anybody else on the line or anybody on the video that I might have missed? Okay, so we're gonna move on. Do we have any comments from the public, clerk?
I do not see any comments.
Okay, so we're gonna move on to the next item. We're now gonna proceed to approving the meeting minutes from our September 3rd, 2020 meeting. May I have a motion to approve the September 3rd, 2020 meeting minutes?
So moved. Motion. Barry Pollard.
Barry Pollard with the motion. Can I get a second?
Craig Jones, I'll second.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. And I'll call on the clerk for the roll call vote. Clerk?
Yes. Craig Jones, Alliance for Regional Solutions.
Approve.
Rose Ceballos, Bayside Community Center.
Approve.
Lisa Cuestas, Casa Familiar.
Approve.
Randy Van Vleck, City Heights CDC.
Approve.
Brenda Lee Rodriguez, Chula Vista Community Collaborative.
Approve.
Carol Lewis, El Cajon Collaborative.
Approve.
Ana Ardon, National Latino Research Center.
Approve.
Elizabeth Liu, Nile Sisters.
Approved.
Clara Korobner, Olivewood Gardens.
Approve.
Faye Seligman, Samahan Health Centers.
Approve.
Barry Pollard, Urban Collaborative Project.
Approved.
And Erica Leary, Vista Community Clinic.
Approve.
That's unanimous approval.
Okay, wonderful. So item 1 passes unanimously with the members that are present. And now we're going to move on to if CBO members would like to offer any comments or questions, please either turn on your cameras or raise your hands at this time. Okay, let's see. I see Mr. Craig Jones on, followed by Miss Erica Leary. Go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a comment related not on any particular agenda item today, but just kind of generally. I've been speaking with a colleague over the last few days about this particular RTP process in Sandag, and it has led me to this thought. All institutions engage in self-justification to some extent. Historically, Sandag has been very good at creating justification and support for predetermined plans. Now, interesting to me in this case is that there is a chance for a genuinely better regional transportation plan and approach to public transportation. I see my job as holding feet to the fire to make sure that this is true. And that'll be the nature of my questions on agenda items today. I think this is particularly true for the general population, but also particularly for the disadvantaged populations that we CBO representatives are here to support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I believe I saw Miss Erica on. Did I get that wrong? Maybe
I didn't recall raising my hand, but since you called on me, I'll just, I don't know if this is the right place to make the comment, but I did want to note that I really appreciated the vision video that we saw at the last meeting, but I was a little disappointed that the Spanish version was only subtitles. So I don't know if there's any capacity to put a Spanish audio version of that video together, but I would find that very, very helpful if there were.
Okay, duly noted. And just a reminder to the CBO members, if your camera is on, that to me tells me that you'd like to speak. So if I call on you, and before we move on to public comment, I want to thank Mr. Barry Pollard for presenting at the joint meeting last week. Mr. Pollard, you represented us very well, and I want to thank you. And now, do we have any comments from the public, clerk?
I do not see any hands raised.
Okay, and so we're going to move on to our next item, which is members of the public are going to have the opportunity to address the working group on any issues within the jurisdiction of Sandag that is not on the agenda. Do we have any comments?
I do not see any comments.
Okay. And so we don't, okay, so we're gonna move on to the next item, which is the my report. And so just to fill you guys in, over the past few weeks, Sandag and its partners have given tours to two very important state officials, the California Transportation Commission Chair, Hillary Norton, and our new Caltrans Director, Toks Omishikan. They toured the Los Sands Corridor, the Del Mar Bluffs, the Mid-Coast Trolley construction, as well as the large-scale work being done on SR 11 along the border in the South County. The CTC chair, Chair Norton, was very impressed with our cooperative relationship that leads to outstanding results from the regional projects. If you guys haven't been down to see the SR 11 or have followed the Otay Mesa 2, I would greatly welcome you to it's actually in the county land, which is right next to District 8. So I also had the privilege of touring the SR 11 and also the future site for Otay Mesa 2. I also wanted to mention that Colleen Clemenson and Ray Major just presented the Sandag vision for the 2021 regional plan to the joint meetings of the CTC, CARB, and CHCD. So thank you for sharing your input on the vision at the last working group meeting. It was very critical to hear your ideas about about what you want in this plan. And so I really thank everybody who stepped up and commented. And so we're gonna move, and also, as I mentioned earlier, thank you, Mr. Barry Pollard. We are gonna move on to the next item now, which is Sandag staff. Mr. Richard Radcliffe is gonna explain the draft 2021 Regional Transportation Improvement Program. I'll take it away.
Thank you. Okay, so good morning, everybody. My name is Richard Radcliffe, and I'm a financial analyst at Sandag. And in this item, I will be discussing the preparation of the 2021 Regional Transportation Improvement Program, or RTIP, including the development schedule. The RTIP is often confused with the Regional Transportation Plan, or RTP, so I'd like to briefly remind everybody of the difference. The RTP is the long-range transportation plan for the region, whereas the RTIP is the 5-year short-term program of projects that implements the projects in the regional plan. Basically, the RTIP takes the first 5 years of the regional plan and says how we're going to fund those projects. The projects are programmed in the RTIP so that the funding can be made available for the projects. All projects in the region that are funded with federal, state, and Transnet dollars are required to be programmed in the RTIP. And California state law requires that we update the RTIP every 2 years. So the 2021 RTIP will cover fiscal years 2021 through 2025. This RTIP implements the projects in the 2019 federal RTP, and the 2023 RTIP will implement the projects in the 2021 regional plan. The update process began this summer, and we asked for projects to be submitted by October 31st. And if Tracy or someone can please pull up the attachment 1.
Catherine, I think, can pull that up, or has that. Do you have that, Catherine?
Yes, is it the table Transnet program of projects?
It is. Let me stop share, and then you can share your screen.
Okay. Okay, let's see. Okay, let me know if you guys can see it.
Yep, that's it. Thank you. Okay, so here is attachment 1, which shows the projects that were included in the 2020 Transnet program of projects for local agencies. Local agencies completed the template provided in attachment 1, which illustrates all 5 years of the POP, or the program of projects. This template shows how much Transnet is programmed by year per project and includes the total Transnet programmed and the total revenue. The 2020 Transnet POP was programmed as an amendment to the 2018 RTIP, and the projects were carried forward into the 2021 RTIP as they were programmed. The Transnet POP is made up of only local agencies projects, and the full RTIP will include all SANDAG and Caltrans projects. Additional projects can be added through an amendment when new funding or information is available. On December 11th, the board will be asked to release the 2021 RTIP for a 30-day public comment period. All members and interested parties will be notified and are asked to review the projects. Comments are highly encouraged. After the public comment period, there will be a public hearing at the February 5th, 2021 Transportation Committee meeting, and the board will be asked to adopt the 2021 RTIP at its meeting on February 26th. Federal approval is expected on April 16th of 2021. And again, additional projects may be added to the RTIP through an amendment during the RTIP period. That concludes my report, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
All right, sorry for the delay. And now it's the turn of our working group members. If you would like to offer any comments or if you have any questions, please turn on your camera or raise your hand at this time. Now I see Catherine Mattel. Would you like to take it away?
I think that might have been on accident.
Okay, no problem.
Catherine's our intern. She was helping with the
Yes.
I think Craig Jones has his hand up.
Oh, I see. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Jones.
Thank you very much. Richard, I think I heard you mention this, but I want to be very, very clear for the record. My concern, this is, if I remember correctly, this is the second RTIP being processed during this extended 5 Big Moves RTP process that we've been going through. My concern is that both in intent and in substance, that the details, the projects of this RTIP be consistent with the draft proposed 5 Big Moves plan that we've been working on, and as opposed to moving forward the 2015 RTP. So could you clarify for us if the substance, if the details of this RTIP would serve to advance in intent and in substance the 5 Big Moves?
Maybe Sue, if she's on the line, maybe she could help answer that question. As far as this RTIP though, since it covers fiscal years 21 through 25, it will be covering, like I was saying, it implements the projects in the 2019 federal RTP and the 2023 RTIP, which will be beginning work on, I believe, next fall. We'll be implementing the projects in the 2021 regional plan.
So given that, my concern is that as we know, the 2019 federal RTP was basically a rehash of the 2015 RTP, which is not consistent with the intent of the 5 Big Moves. I want to be very sure that this commitment of dollars does not serve to slow down or not achieve the desired ends of the 5 Big Moves.
Hi, Craig. Yeah, my name is Sue Alpert. I'm the program manager for the RTIP. And I just, to address your concerns, as Richard said, this implements the 2019 federal RTP, and we do have to, we're required to have an approved RTP that we're implementing. So we can't really have projects in here from a plan that hasn't been approved yet. However, there's a transition period of projects that are going to be supporting the new direction. And some of those projects were approved by the board in September of 2019 that sort of begin to implement some of these new ideas. We have, and I think you'll probably be having a presentation about the comprehensive multimodal corridor plans. These are being developed, and they are just looking at every corridor to see how to begin implementing some of these 5 big moves in those corridors. And those are programmed in this RTIP, as well as several other major corridor projects. But we do have also a commitment to continue to implement the Transnet program of projects. And so that's what's mostly programmed in here, as well as the local projects. The ones that are on the screen are the projects that are implemented by local agencies with their local revenue on their local Transnet dollars.
So I guess what this boils down to then would be this. Is any of this proposed RTIP inconsistent with the nature of the 5 big moves?
I mean, that I would say no. But I'm not sure what inconsistent would be, honestly. However, as Richard mentioned, that we will, when we do the 2023 RTIP, that will be based on the 21 regional plan, but we will also be doing an amendment to this plan when the 21 plan is approved. So we'll amend the 21 RTIP at that time.
So there'll be a chance to fix any possible inconsistencies at that time?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to be very clear on this, because again, it's very important for our constituency that the 5 big moves actually be realized. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for your comments. And maybe, Mr. Jones, if you'd like, we could have this item back a little after the plan gets approved, just to make sure that we bring up your points, because I think they're very valid. So we'll make note of that, just to follow up.
And I encourage you, I'm sorry.
You guys are doing a wonderful job, but that's our job, right? To make sure everything is lickety split.
Right. When it's released for public comment, I do encourage you to review the project listing. And if there's anything in there that you do see as inconsistent, please feel free to comment.
This is a huge list of projects, and I have to confess, I didn't go through this with a fine-tooth comb.
It is.
It's a great question, though.
It's only a subset, too.
Thank you. And does that conclude your comments, Mr. Jones?
Yes, thank you.
Wonderful. And I see Mr. Barry Pollard.
Yes, hi. Richard, good presentation. Thank you. I think I've got a question for both you and Sue. So it sounds like that the RTIP is going to still come before and are going to be opportunities to make changes, because one of the things that, and I'm going to start sounding like a broken record, is we're dealing from the period of time of 2021 to 2025. So my question to you is, how can we supplement some sort of equity involvement of communities of concern in this RTIP process? That's specifically it. Generally, and I guess Jane and Ms. Moreno, I would like to see our outreach have at least one session of what does equity look like in this process, because it doesn't seem like it's being included, and I'm saying the word seem, it doesn't seem like it's being included as we continue with business as usual. And so I'm going to have a radar screen out that says, every time we start moving along this process, I want us all to be mindful of the redlining, the underserved communities, the communities with no infrastructure, and all of these things has to be woven in to the designs and the projects, I would think, moving forward. Now that's going to be a huge decision, and that's why I'm suggesting to Jane and Ms. Moreno, is there a strategy even at the board level, to include formally in the process and procedures of some sort of equity component, because these folks are just following orders. And we need to send a message, I think, to the board or to the chairperson that if we're really, really serious about this, then we need to do something rather than talking about something.
Okay.
So Steve, Sue, can you, when's a good chance when these issues could be brought up to maybe have a broader vision of equitable transportation as we move along with this RTIP? The RTP is going to be different, but give me some help. How do we do that?
So the equity analysis for the region is done in the RTP. We don't have a requirement for that in the RTIP, again, because the project's already approved in the RTP. So this relies on that equity analysis. That doesn't mean we can't take a closer look at it. We could talk to our equity group.
Yes, that is what I would like, because that could be a step towards putting more of a magnifying glass on it rather than business as usual. It's done in the RTP, in the RTP, and so business as usual is let's continue with that process. I'm not sure that element works at that point because look where we are now. So that's what I'm talking about, is a culture change to look, how effective is that RTP? What is it about? Is it actually solving what we want it to solve? And my question is it may not be if we're standing having this conversation now, that may be an area to start looking a little closer at it. So
Okay.
that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
No, thank you for your comments. And I think I'm hearing what you're saying. You want the board to have some type of, or you're suggesting that the board have some type of focus on equity, being that, is there an equity component for the Transnet funds? Like there is an environmental component?
You asking Sue or Steve?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm asking staff.
Okay.
Is it a requirement is what I'm asking? Is it legally a requirement to have some type of equity lens based on legislation that we have right now?
I don't believe there is a requirement. I have to review the ordinance terms, but you know, the list of projects in the ordinance was voter approved. So whatever equity analysis was done in 2004, when that list was developed, is what's required to be implemented. As far as the local agencies, they have their own requirements that they need to implement.
Got you. Okay, and
Madam Chair, Colleen Clemenson, Planning Director at Sandag. I wonder if I could just jump in here and maybe add a couple things. I think this is an absolutely wonderful discussion, and I'm really glad you brought this up, Barry. The team is correct that we do an equity analysis at the regional plan level. We don't do anything specific at the RTIP level. And I think raising this is a really good idea. And I think that this is something that we could look at as part, you know, coming out of the regional plan. We have made a commitment that equity is one of the three primary components of this overall vision and plan that we plan to take to the Sandag Board of Directors in 2021. And I think it's a great opportunity. So we don't have something in place to do it today, but I think thinking about how we can do that going forward is critical. Wonderful. It's critical. So anyway, thank you for bringing that up. I will work with my team on how we bring something forward, but that's an excellent point. So thank you, Chairwoman.
Wonderful, thank you. And I see two of our board members with their hands up. We're going to start with Lisa Cuesta, followed by Randy Torres.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to emphasize some of what Craig and Barry is talking about, because we're starting to look at things where dollars are being spent. And that is when all the feedback that we've been providing over the last several meetings, and when we continue to see presentations and dollars being spent, that's where out front, to me, that's where the feedback of what we've been hearing in the past several meetings, put it in the presentation out front. What is happening with that feedback, and how is it reflected in the investment and projects that are being put in front of us? And I think if that is always part of the presentation and it's put out in front, because that we keep hearing the same thing at the meetings, what does it look like in everything? Because we don't want it just to happen in this 2020 vision. No, what we're saying is that it needs to be in every part of the way investment and planning has to happen. And so I think the staff is doing a great job, but I think it's those things where, how do you let the equity lens trickle in, and the feedback that you're getting from this group, call it out as to, because of this feedback, this is the enhancement or the change that is happening. And I think that'll get folks to be even more engaged and to really get behind a new plan.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lisa. And moving on to Randy.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Yeah, great comments, good discussion. Yeah, there's a lot of important decisions that are made here in this RTIP that have an impact on our communities. This is where hundreds of millions of dollars are allocated for the things that we hear about locally, from streets to bike lanes to trees, intersections. There's a lot in here. I'm digging through it. And I think that we could play a big role here as a liaison with even our city staff. My understanding is a lot of these city level RTIP recommendations are made by like the directors of planning, the transportation directors, and a lot of that, there isn't a public kind of like a really proactive, robust public process for that, right? It's really coming from the directors of the cities to SANDAG, and they make these requests for a lot of these projects to be funded. So I'm looking at the list, the Transnet program of projects here, and I'm just seeing the RTIP projects that are for cities. Where are the RTIP projects that SANDAG, for SANDAG related projects?
Those will be included in the full RTIP.
Right, when we're ready, when it's really approved by the board to be released for public, we will send an e-blast around to everybody, including this group, and then it'll be available online to review, and that'll include those projects from Caltrans and SANDAG. But as far as your comments, Randy, about the public process for the cities, generally the RTIP projects reflect their capital improvement budgets, and there's a requirement for each city to have a public hearing and a signed resolution before they approve their projects and submit their projects to SANDAG. So there is an opportunity at that level to participate.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't see any other. I'm sorry. Did that complete your comments, Randy?
Yes, they did. Thank you.
I don't see any other panelists with their hands raised, so I'm going to take my chair's discretion, right, to speak. And I think, the equity conversation has been a topic in the city of San Diego. It's, we're currently discussing it. We're talking about an equity index fund. And just to piggyback on some of what Randy said, I do want to point out that the directors are appointed by the mayor in the case of the city of San Diego, and the city council does approve these projects. So it absolutely, I agree with you 100%. It absolutely behooves us to to implement some of the equity discussion when we are making those decisions. Also, I want to remind, you guys are frozen. Am I frozen? No, we're still going.
You're not
Good.
frozen.
Okay,
You're good.
everybody froze.
We're just frozen listening to you, like captivated.
No, I want to remind this CBO working group. You know, my place here is to facilitate a discussion, right? I sit on the board of SANDAG, so I am happy to report anything that this group wants or would like me to address to the actual full board. You guys are, you guys are willing to make motions and get seconds and approve things. So my job here is to facilitate a discussion, and that's why I will continue to encourage everybody to raise their hands, to let me know, to let all of us know what you guys think. So absolutely, I'm a messenger for you guys. So I welcome you guys to let me know what you want me to say at the board meeting regarding the RTIP, regarding equity. So with that, I see a few hands up. I see Mr. Barry Pollard and Mr. Craig Jones. Take it away, Mr. Pollard.
Okay, good. Which could be a very good venue of us giving you that information if we had a separate like working group meeting and talking about the whole topic of equity and what does that look like to all of us. And then you could tell us the process of how we can implement some of these things, like including equity. I love the equity index fund. That sounds very promising. Also, some sort of mechanism to make sure that at the basic levels of design, that is indeed one of the elements that are considered. And that means like in planning and in, outreach more than just there's public opinion, right? I mean, there's got to be some degree of marketing to let people know that if you want improvements in your communities, and that's what we're for, but in addition to us, right? Get it out into the communities and let people know that this directly impacts our streets, our landscaping, our street lights, our on-ramps, yada, yada, yada. And make it and start connecting the dots, because one of the things is those dots aren't connected. People in the community has still no idea of how they can impact transportation. I mean, they look at that like it is what it is, and it's too technical, it's too boring. So all of that stuff's got to be at least looked at as to how transportation is even communicated.
And I think the conversation that we're having right now is very cutting edge, right?
Yep.
It's high time that that we're talking about this, but I think that the CBO can be a conduit to have obviously you guys have a direct line with the city of San Diego and the council through me, but what about the other smaller cities, and what are they doing? So thank you for that. And once, we that could potentially be a next topic that we discuss at our next meeting, right? I'm happy to facilitate that within our CBO working group, because we are a committee of the board. So a committee of the committee, it's getting a little park and rec. But if you guys want that, we can make it happen. But I'm happy to discussion at the next working group meeting, because I do not agree with you more that equity needs to be at the forefront of every conversation. And Mr. Pollard, if it completes your comments, I'm going to move on to Mr. Jones.
I'm good.
Go ahead, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, and I appreciate this extended discussion. I realize that this item on our agenda is an information item only, but based on the nature of our discussion here today, I would, and your idea, Madam Chair, I'd like to put forward a motion that our specific concerns regarding this RTIP be made explicitly part of the record that goes forward to the Transportation Committee on their meeting on December 4 and their meeting of February 5. And then as this moves forward to the full board of directors. That's my motion.
Okay, do we hear a second? There is
Yes,
a motion on the floor.
there's a second. Barry Pollard.
Okay, Mr. Pollard. And now if you could repeat your motion, please, just to make sure that we got it.
Yes, it's that the concerns of us, the CBO working group, regarding this proposed 2021 RTIP be transmitted explicitly to the Sandag Transportation Committee for their meetings of December 4 and February 5. And then as this RTIP moves forward to the full board of directors.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I just want to jump in because there's a little bit of an error. The Transportation Committee meeting is December 11th, so might as well get the motion perfectly right.
Okay, wonderful.
Thank you.
Okay, so the concern of the CBO working group that the 2021 RTP, that comment be transmitted, that we have a concern with the RTIP. Is that correct?
And I'd like to get the substance, the details of our discussion included, related to consistency with the 5 big moves and the concern about equity.
Okay, equity concern. All right. So we have a motion that this be expressed to the Transportation Committee, and we have a second, but we also still have people waiting to speak. So Mr. Randy Jones.
Did you mean to call on me, Chair Moreno?
Yes.
Okay. You said, you accidentally said Randy Jones there.
Sorry, I apologize.
Merge Craig and I, but it's all good. Yeah, after Craig's comment, I'll just I'll let that move forward. But I'd be happy to support that. I think having it be consistent with 5 big moves is important, and having an equity component is important. I'll just say that the reason why that's important is because I don't think that there could be more oversight to how some of this funding is used. For instance, I think there's $83 million for a road widening in Miramar and the 805. And I'd be curious how that helps us achieve equity. I know that we still have missing sidewalks and unsafe intersections and people waiting in the sun for bus stops in City Heights. I'd much rather see that funding used in a better way. And so I do agree that we need to be evaluating how this funding is used. And I remember when Measure A was being considered in 2016, there was discussion about how do we add a little bit more oversight to some of that funding that goes to the cities. And at that time, I remember there wasn't a whole lot. They could, if the cities wanted to use this to widen roads, they could. And I do have some concerns with that. So I think Craig's motion gets at that. So I'd be happy to support that.
Wonderful, thank you. And it is up to the cities how they spend their Transnet funding and what they do with the RTIP. And so just to give you some details, it's my understanding, and staff could correct me if I'm wrong, but about 50% of the city of San Diego's Transnet funding, which is a little different, but still goes to slurry sealing. So just to leave a little, plant a little seed here with you guys, but I think this is great. We could definitely communicate to the Transportation Committee your guys's the motion, and obviously we have to get the full board's approval or the full committee's approval, working group, sorry. And I think that will let them know that we're working on this. If they want to come to our next meeting and hear our discussion, I think anybody can. So I think this is going to be a good first message. Like I said, we're kind of at the cutting edge of this topic. So we're maneuvering, we're steering the boat in that direction. So we do have a motion on the floor with the second. I do not see anybody's hands up. I think at this time, maybe we could ask for public comment before we actually go on to a vote. I don't see anybody from the public. Clerk, can you verify? Jane, I think you're on mute, but I don't see anybody.
Sorry, yeah, sorry. I realized I was on mute. Yeah, I don't see anyone from the public raising hands.
And so everybody's clear about the motion. And then I will call the vote. Can I call it? Yeah, I can call the vote. Yep. And Jane, if you don't mind taking roll call.
Yes. Craig Jones, Alliance for Regional Solutions.
Yes.
Rose Ceballos, Bayside Community Center.
Yes.
Lisa Cuestas, Casa Familiar.
Yes.
City Height, Randy Torres Van Vleck, City Heights CDC.
Yes.
Brenda Lee Rodriguez, Chula Vista Community Collaborative.
Yes.
Carol Lewis, El Cajon Collaborative.
Yes.
Ana Ardon, National Latino Research Center.
Yes.
Nile Sisters Development Initiative, Elizabeth Liu. Let's see if Elizabeth is here.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Claire Grosvenor, Olivewood Gardens.
Yes.
Faye Seligman, Samahan Health Centers.
Yes.
Barry Pollard, Urban Collaborative.
Yes.
And Erica Leary, Vista Community Clinic.
Yes.
Okay. Unanimous. Passing.
I don't think I'm a Robert's Rules of Order lover here. Are you abstaining?
Sorry, no, it passes. That was.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought somebody was saying that they passed on the vote. I said I don't.
No, unanimous passes. Yeah.
I'm so sorry, you guys. Wonderful. It passes unanimously. So that message will be conveyed to the Transportation Committee, and just I feel it necessary to bring it up at the board meeting when I do my presentation, or when I notify them of what the CBO group worked on. So Mr. Radcliffe, thank you so much for the great conversation that you spurred. Yeah, you know, this is information, and information is power. So we appreciate your time. And we're going to move on to item number 6. It is being presented by Mr. Sam Sanford, and this is a follow-up from the Comprehensive Multimodal Corridor Program we discussed last month regarding performance measures. So Mr. Sanford, take it away.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. And Tracy, would you like to share the presentation, or I can share my screen either way? Oh, there you go.
There we go.
All right. Well, I'm very pleased to be here today and to follow on that wonderful discussion. I think you're going to find many of the items that were just brought up, we are working into the CMCP, the Comprehensive Multimodal Corridor Plan performance measures. So there'll be some ties in. As Chairwoman mentioned, this is a follow-up item from September, October, asked to come back and present on the performance measures for the CMCPs and a little bit of the structure that we're using for these. So a little bit of background, we'll go over the measures and also pay some additional attention on the social equity aspects of the measures. So Jane and I were able to work very closely together on the development on the performance measure side and how to do the social equity analysis. And we also came up with some kind of novel new performance measures that are closely parallel to our social equity analysis. They're going to help shed light on the impacts into the future of these plans. So before getting into the measures themselves, to talk about the structure, these measures that I'm going to go through today are set up to be common for all the performance or all the CMCPs. Currently, we have 5 plans underway, 5 CMCPs. And so these measures would be used to help evaluate all 5 or the alternatives for all 5. It should be noted that each CMCP team is also encouraged to develop their own unique performance measures in addition to these that I'm going to share today, because there might be some unique characteristics, some aspects of the corridor that these general common measures can't capture. Or if we included them for the common, it would apply to one area and not the other 4. So we are encouraging those teams to continue to develop additional measures for that purpose. Now, the purpose of these performance measures is really to better understand the anticipated changes from the alternatives, and also between no build conditions and the conditions that we get to as far as alternative A, B, and C, or however many alternatives that the CMCP teams develop. So as the CMCP teams develop alternatives of different projects groupings, they can use these performance measures to understand the trade-offs between those. So really these measures are meant to inform the discussion, to provide details that can move the conversation along. Right? There's no waiting, there's no prioritization of the measures. It's just for informing that discussion. One piece as far as the structure, when we kicked this off, we looked at guidance from California Transportation Committee, from Federal Highway Administration and Federal Transit Administration to see what they were recommending that these comprehensive plans should include. And there's a whole list of policy areas that they are recommending. And we wanted to incorporate those 3 agencies because when these plans are done and we're going to go out and start working on developing or seeking funding, we're going to go to those 3 agencies. So we want to incorporate their guidance as much as possible. So what we did is we combined all that guidance into 12 policy consideration areas. So we'll see that as we go through we can see that on the slide right now in the far left column. So those were kind of guiding areas as we went through identifying performance measures. Other aspects were these measures need to look into the future. So we're not necessarily looking at observed past data and how we've done in the past. We're trying to model what's going to happen into the future based on the transportation solutions or projects that the CMCP teams develop and select. So by that, I mean, we're trying to utilize the activity-based model or the transportation model that we have at SANDAG, utilizing those tools within it to understand the future impacts. So we're a little bit limited in trying to use the model itself, because then we can actually see what's going to happen in the future. And there are some measures where that gets a little complicated and we have to go off model. But where possible, we were trying to limit that approach. Other pieces, well, let's jump into them. And I think you guys can see the slide. My screen is doing a little funny piece to me, but I believe you're looking at the blue table.
We're looking at the recommended performance measure, and it is the blue table.
Thank you. All right, so on this slide, far left, we have the first 4 of the 12 policy consideration areas. And then in those, in the center section, we have the performance measures themselves. When we went through trying to identify what are our candidate performance measures, we did look at past regional transportation plans. We looked at the 2021 regional transportation plan a regional plan that's being developed currently. We also looked at other corridor plans from different regions. So from Central California, Northern California, we looked at others and to see what they were doing and what they were able to accomplish as we went through this process. So we had a list of, over 50 performance measures that we were kind of evaluating as to, could we use it? Is it beneficial? Does it provide us actionable information once we run it through a model? And we had input from the city staff for the CMCPs that are currently underway. So we had City of San Diego, National City, Oceanside, and there's a large group was providing feedback over approximately 3 months as we went through this. And then for many of the measures, we tested them to see. A key difference with the CMCPs compared to the regional plan is that we are analyzing the data at a sub-regional geography. So we're not looking, county-wide how this measure does. we're looking at the study area for each CMCP separately. So it allows us to get to this finer granularity, but that also complicates the modeling piece. So we needed to test on several of the measures. Does this actually produce data that we anticipate? So the first area, in no order of importance, is multimodal focus. And for there, we have two performance measures. We're looking at percent change in mode share, and that would be for commute trips and all trips. Many of these are very traditional transportation planning performance measures, but there's a couple in here that I was really liking the previous conversation on the previous item, that we were able to flex and push the envelope a little bit further than we have in the past with these CMCPs, especially on social equity. So we'll get to those in just a minute. Sorry, I'm leading a little. The second mode share question or performance measure is for short trips. So this is where we're able to tease out trips that are 3 miles or less. And this really helps us understand for flexible fleets, for active transportation, how much of maybe more of an urban area, that's going to be a much higher portion of all trips. So we had 2 on mode share. The second policy consideration area is on economic development and goods movement. And again, we have 2 measures here. We have percent of residents that can access either tier 1 or tier 2 employment centers and higher education within these 2 different time bins, 30 minutes and 45 minutes. So for this one, we anticipate making maps showing kind of the catchment areas within the CMCPs that can, for the population that can reach these areas. We're looking at this principally in terms of transit. We'll look at auto as well. It may be that auto returns a number like 99.9%, so it's not a very actionable, informative value. So if that's the case, we will continue to focus just on the transit side. So some of these measures, we are still in the process of fine-tuning the exact methodology as we transition to the CMCP planning areas. The second measure there is on freight, so the average amount of time in congestion. This would be for the state highway system and also on the arterials, looked at separately for all-day traffic. On the third policy consideration area, we have system operations and congestion relief. We're looking at total corridor person throughput. So for this, we will work with the CMCP teams to identify locations where they think would be best to have a screen line to see, what is kind of the optimal throughput of individuals on a particular corridor. So looking at things like vehicle occupancy, transit occupancy, obviously the number of vehicles through that area. Second bullet in that policy area is the daily vehicles delay per capita. So again, another delay measure, but this one's focusing on all vehicles based on the population in that area. And then the third one is one of the areas that's a new measure that we're working on is system completeness. For this, we're looking at the top origin and destination pairs within a CMCP planning area. And then once we have those pairs, it may be top 10, top 5, we want to see as we look into the future, 2025, 2035, and 2050, is it possible for individuals to travel between those pairs using 1, 2, or 3 modal options? For some of these pairs currently, it's probably going to be auto only. As the CMCP teams develop their transportation solutions, this measure would help identify areas that currently might only have 1 option available. And then in the future, with the plan implementation, that 1 option would go to 2 and then on to 3 and be more multimodal. The third policy consideration area on this slide is low income and disadvantaged community focus. So here we have the percent of population within a half mile of high frequency transit stops. And this is one of the social equity analysis performance measures. So we're going to follow a similar approach with the regional plan for social equity analysis, and that we'll be looking at the social equity focused populations and then their non-populations, but keeping in mind that CMCP geography. So not region-wide, but actually focused on that study area itself. The second measure there is the accessible investments within disadvantaged communities. So this one I want to spend a little bit of time. It's also a new one where we're working to try and push what we have done in the past to capture more social equity into the CMCP process. So this measure is looking at where investments are being made relative to the known location of populations for social equity focused populations, I should say. So if we have active transportation that's going in within a certain distance of social equity focused population, that would be accessible. If it's a bus line, but there's no transit stop that passes through that area, well, that would not be accessible. So for this measure, we are trying to align how much the investments are, where they are located relative to the social equity focused populations. So that's one that, you know, based on that prior conversation on that earlier item, I was like, this will be a great item. So we're working on fine tuning that methodology and how that's going to work specifically, but we're making inroads on that one. Next slide, please. So here we have the next 5 of the 12 policy consideration areas. The ones that are more traditional that you've probably seen in the past for other regional plans, I'll skip through a little quicker. But the first policy consideration area is the regional greenhouse gas emissions and the vehicle miles traveled area. So for this, we are looking at VMT, vehicle miles traveled, and we'll look at that as the region or that study area, per capita, and lane miles. We also have greenhouse gas emissions. And this one we'll be looking at total greenhouse gas emissions. So not the SB 375 specific methodology, which is a little nuanced and very focused. This, we would just want to get total, how impactful and beneficial are the CMCP transportation solutions for reducing GHG. Second policy consideration area on this slide is improve air quality and public health. So here we have on-road smog forming pollutants. This is looking at reactive organic gases and oxides of nitrogen, NOx. And then we also, the second bullet there is the particulate matter 2.5, so that fine particulate matter exposure. This one we are using a tool called CTMFAC. So we're doing some testing on that tool to see that it can actually model and produce the data we need for these particular measures at a CMCP planning area. Third area, active transportation and micromobility. We're looking at bicycle and pedestrian miles traveled. So as facilities are added, the model will continue to align and provide different options for that synthetic population as it runs through what people are going to choose to do as far as the activity-based model is concerned. And so we want to see what those impacts will be as CMCP teams add different types of bicycle and pedestrian facilities. Second bullet is the percent of the population engaged in 20 minutes or more of transportation-related physical activity. This is a measure that we've used in past regional transportation plans. Getting towards these last ones, you'll see that we had a challenge that the policy consideration areas become more and more focused on land use. And what the activity-based model that we use is really good at is transportation. So there's a little bit of a tough spot where we are trying to develop the best possible measures that will show us the future conditions based on transportation, but the policy consideration areas are very much land use focused. So that's one piece I want us to think about as we go through these last few performance measures. So for improved job housing balance, we're looking at the population in multifamily residences within a quarter mile of a transit stop. So for this, we can look at both the percent and the number within the CMCP planning area. We can also look at the average commute time to work. Now, this is one of the ones where I really wanted to work on the average commute distance. You know, if we can drive that distance down where we get housing and employer closer together, or employment closer together, that's the ultimate goal. But our model is more focused on the transportation system, not land use. So that was a challenge. We can't forecast exactly how land use changes are going to be in the future. So that was one of the challenges. And so one of the changes we had to make was to make that a commute time versus commute distance. Last policy area on this slide is the increase supply of affordable housing. Again, a tough one to model. So what we came up with was multifamily housing within a half mile of high frequency transit. So this is essentially looking at, can multifamily housing communities access transit? Next slide, please. And this will be the last one on the performance measures. There's 24 in total. So we get to our public safety and security policy consideration areas. For this one, we focused on public safety. Security is not an area that we can model, but what we are working on with this policy consideration area is looking at the list of projects that each of the CMCP teams develops, and also the crash reduction factor for particular project types, and coming up with essentially an index of what the anticipated reduction in crashes would be if those projects are implemented. That's that first bullet there. The second one is the additional miles of protected and separated bike facilities, looking at percent and number there. Because we have studies that have shown, or there are studies nationwide that have shown that the addition of these kind of facilities does drive down vulnerable user crashes in particular. The second policy consideration area on this slide is preserving existing transportation infrastructure. So for this one, we are looking at bridges in the first bullet, and then vulnerability for all facilities in the second bullet. For bridges, we chose to look at those for two parts. One, they're a very expensive capital asset that we want to preserve. And secondly, they have key connections as far as travel across the region. If a bridge is out, a reroute might be a significant extended travel time. So we wanted to look at those. And there is data based on looking at the condition of bridges, looking at good, fair, and poor condition based on different parts of the bridge that we can look at, and then we can extrapolate out into the future when those would need to be serviced. Second one on here is the transportation infrastructure vulnerability. For this one, we are leveraging some of the work that Caltrans has done, along with some SANDAG work, looking at identifying where there's going to be sea level rise, cliff erosion, excessive heat, mapping those areas, and then also overlaying where we anticipate projects to be located and seeing if there's any concerns with that. So we can develop an index based on that aspect as well. The very last policy consideration area is one where we could not come up with a performance measure to look into the future of anticipated impacts. So this is looking at preventing residential and small business displacement. So it's an area that we want to track, and we want to develop tools and a process to make sure that we can address that policy consideration area, but we couldn't come up with a performance measure. So what we've come up with is essentially an idea that when it comes to the design phase, so a design consideration, that jurisdiction should be looking at the non-owner occupied residents of and small businesses, and also the housing burdened households within that area. So as a project is added to an area, is that going to increase rents? Are there a lot of renters in that area that they could be priced out of that area? Are there a lot of owners? We want that to be taken in consideration in the design phase, which is where they're going to be siting or locating the exact spot where that facility should be. And we think that's the more appropriate time to bring that into consideration. So looking back at spending a little bit of time on the social equity measures themselves, there are 3 that we are going to be working through the social equity analysis process, where we have the social equity focus areas or focus populations and the non-populations. We have the percent of population residents that can access employment centers. And then we also have the percent of population within a half mile of high frequency transit. And then we have the environmental burden of average PM 2.5 exposure. Those are the 3 that will go through the full analysis. But there was 3 additional measures that is kind of where we're pushing the envelope of what we've done in the past that I think I want to highlight as well. Those are listed at the bottom of the slide here. We have accessible investments in disadvantaged communities. That's figuring out where facilities are going to be located relative to the social equity focus populations, the population in multifamily residence within quarter mile of a transit stop, and then also multifamily housing within a half mile of high frequency transit. So these are just the social equity portions on the performance side. There's also social equity when it goes to outreach, and Jane has been working with the CMCP teams on that structure, and they have their consultants on board to continue to work on what that's going to look like. These will be just the performance measures that will be applied to the current 5 CMCP areas, and we'll get these analysis back as they go through their different alternatives, and we'll see, you know, if alternative A looks great in every category, wonderful. Chances are option A was going to look great in some areas, option B is going to look better in other areas, and they might have to come up with a hybrid that capitalizes on the strengths of each and come up with a third or a fourth option. So that's all I have for today. I did want to give a thanks to my colleague Ying Ouyang, who really helped me and helped with developing these performance measures on the modeling side. But I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I see Craig Jones's hands up.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate again the extended time. I've got some questions about the overall CMCPs themselves, the 5 that are now being worked on, as well as the 7 that are not yet in process, if they are or are not consistent with the 5 big moves idea. Is that easily answerable?
I think, so I'm more on the performance measure side, but to get to your question, the ideas within the 5 big moves are kind of just, they become part of the ether of planning that's going on right now. So it's hard to even think outside of that area right now. So as these CMCP are being developed, those are naturally a piece of it. People are automatically thinking of, okay, transit leap and the next OS, how can that be incorporated? The CMCP teams do not have the same limits as the RTIP earlier item where it has to be consistent. These are planning documents. So yeah, they can leverage those new ideas and bring them into the CMCPs.
Will the CMCPs as they're developed come before us?
I think they've had one presentation before you as far as structure. I think I'm the second presentation as far as structure. My understanding is as far as each area, they're probably going to reach out to groups within their planning area to get their input. So I don't know if there's going to be a regional approach. I would anticipate that it's going to be more of a sub-regional, you know, for we have the 78 corridor, which goes all the way from 76 down to Palomar Airport. So groups that are in that area, stakeholders within that area would be brought into that discussion, which would be a different discussion than the 805 group, for instance.
I would simply request that we as a group get notification when those move forward. I know we're running short on time. I got some questions about the performance measures themselves. I'll be as quick as possible. The first one, multimodal focus. This is percent change in mode share. My question is, from what mode to what mode?
So for these, we have a base year of 2016. So we have a data from that year and we can see how that changes over time. And we can actually look at change essentially from, or increases in, say, transit from 2025, 2035, 2050.
So the goal is to move from the individual automobile to shared or public transit. That's the goal being measured?
That's what the measure will capture.
Okay.
Now,
so
conversely, if the transportation solutions that are presented increase single or drive alone traffic, the measure would show that as well.
I just want to make sure that the performance that we're measuring is a performance that's positive in our sense, moving away from the single occupancy automobile. On economic development and goods movement, percent of residents, will this be broken down by race and income, this measure?
So that is one of the social equity performance measures. So yeah, that'll have the low income, minority, and also senior breakdown.
So as this performance measure is measured, we'll see the public will see the results broken down by race and income. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. Low income and disadvantaged community, percent of population within a half mile of high frequency. Again, will this be broken down by race and income?
Percent of population within half mile high frequency. Yeah, that's all the social equity, the ones that have a parentheses on the social equity measures, those will have minority, low income, and senior breakdown.
Very good. On reduced greenhouse gas emissions, this is going to measure daily VMT corridor. What are we measuring this against? What is the goal that we're trying to achieve?
So the measures themselves, there's no target associated with these measures. These measures are really meant to inform the discussion. So you need to have alternatives. So each CMCP team has different kind of assemblies of projects, and that way the measures will say, you know, alternative A reduces GHG by 1 and alternative B reduces it by 3. It's
okay,
really
I just want to suggest that, you know, to defeat global warming, we have to not just say that we're achieving some success, but we need to really have substantial success. So I would hope we'd include some comparison against where we need to go to defeat global warming. Finally, increased supply of affordable housing, multifamily housing within a half mile of high frequency. It occurs to me that simply multiple family housing does not assure affordability. There can be new development of multifamily housing, but it can be outside the realm of affordability. And we shouldn't assume that multiple family is automatically affordable, and affordable to whom. So I'm hoping, will we have a chance for this measure to look at affordability and not just multifamily housing?
So this is one of the ones that, frankly, we struggled with, because when it comes to affordable housing, we can get a sense of current stock and where we are across the region. Even that is a little bit of a challenge, but we can get it currently. But going into the future, 2025, 35, and 50, we don't know where or how much there will be across the region. So this is one of the ones that we struggled with.
Yeah, since the policy consideration is increased supply of affordable housing, I want to suggest that this needs to expand out to look at the affordability, actual affordability of what's being done. And, you know, SANDAG can step in if it wishes, as individual jurisdictions look at and approve multifamily housing to really push for affordability, true affordability. Thank you. Those are my questions and comments.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Barry Pollard, followed by Randy Torres.
Okay, let me get off. I'm off mute. Okay. Sam, you did a really good job, and I want to thank you for you've dug deep in some of these areas. So your effort and some of the results are right on point. I got a couple questions. Under one of the slides, you had mentioned daily vehicle delay per capita. That was going to be a performance measure. My question is, I'm assuming those arterials are included.
Correct.
Okay. And under the low income and disadvantaged community focus, I think it had something to do with economics. And this is about investment into the underserved communities. You know, is there some measure we can use to sort of identify how bad these communities really are currently, so we can measure what the heck is needed? Sort of like taking an inventory of the infrastructure and then maybe an overlap or something into the 5 big moves and the infrastructure that's going to be needed. Of course, there's a couple of other layers, but I'm saying some of these communities need basic infrastructure first before we can bring it up to any sort of level. Is there any tool that you could think of or measure the current infrastructure situation?
No, that's an interesting thought. I am not aware of anything transportation related, but this does make me think of more along the lines of where there are planning tools to identify food deserts, as an
Right.
example. There's a methodology that's available to work through data to figure out where those locations are. On a transportation front, that's a interesting thought. I have not looked into that. That's something I can continue to check on. But yeah, I'm not aware of any tools at this point.
Well, the first thing I could, and this is just I'm brainstorming, man, with everyone else. So, so I know Vision Zero for one time came up with the X amount of dangerous intersections in the community, right? And so they listed, and our community had 2 of them, one on Euclid and one on Naranja. And those were just high accident corridors or intersections. There was also, and some of these have been fixed, and that a 94 off-ramp heading west from La Mesa, and that Euclid Avenue exit that is so dangerous. There are other intersections like that. That's been fixed and it works great. I'm telling you, I smile whenever I even take that exit now. Whereas I used to take the federal exit near College Grove, right? Now I actually take that. So it's like taking an inventory of the dangerous ones, of the infrastructure deficiencies, and putting some measurement in that, because that's going to dictate where we need to start improving things. Is we got to take some sort of inventory of where the hell we are now in some of these areas. Not sure if there's a mechanism in place.
So that is part of this process as far as getting existing conditions for each of the CMCP areas to establish where there might be a higher frequency of certain crash types, where there's infrastructure that needs additional maintenance or a repair. So that is part of this. The measures themselves, however, are really forecasting into the future what we anticipate it to be. And that's where we run into some of the limitations of data of what we can actually project out 30 years.
Okay. And
but yeah, what you're mentioning, I think, is going to be covered in the existing conditions piece.
Perfect. One last little comment. When you talk about housing, plug the concept of density in this conversation, because that is what's really going to start driving some of these decisions, I think. So what I mean by that is similarly what Craig was talking about is the affordability. I think we all know that the density is going to bring transportation, or is that the chicken before the egg, right? We want to get, so when we can look 10, 15, 20 years down the road, I think some of these planning groups have some models of where the density is going to be. So that may be the smoke that you look for when where to put these transportation centers and routes and mass transit kind of things. So, and that's just a suggestion. Just look for that density element, because that where there's smoke, there's fire. That probably brings more activity into that specific geographic area. And thank you again for doing a good job, Sam. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. We're going to move on to Randy Torres.
Thanks, everyone. Randy Torres Van Vleck here with the City Heights CDC. Thank you, Sam, for that presentation. Yeah, much improved. It was good to see the performance measures really improved a lot since years ago. In regards to the social equity considerations that are going to be built into that, I noticed that age was a factor. I think that age is an important factor, but I don't think that should be viewed through the lens of social equity. To me, social equity is different than age. We should be aware of age, but I noticed that seniors was included as a social equity indicator. The city of San Diego, we spent a lot of time at the Climate Equity Index document that's going to be going to the city council soon, and we did not recommend that seniors or age be included as an indicator for social equity. Where did the idea come from to include seniors in there?
So I can, do you want,
Go
Sam,
ahead,
do you
Jane.
want that? So there's three, so quite some time ago in a previous cycle of the regional plan, Randy, when we were in the CBO working group discussing forecastable demographics that we needed in order to be able to use the forecasting, use the modeling, the indicators have to be forecastable, and seniors ended up as a conversation of a proxy for limited mobility, being that the threshold is 75 and older. So that's the origin of it. It's not required, but it was one of the indicators that we included.
That was determined, that the idea to include that was partially informed by the working group a few years ago. I remember that conversation, but are we re-exploring the definition of social equity as part of the 5 big moves?
Well, we have, and you mean in terms of the indicators?
Yes,
in
whether
terms
to
of,
include seniors or not.
so we've had that conversation before, but and at some point when you're doing the modeling, you have to sort of close the shop and say this is what we're going to include in the modeling. So whether we use that output is another matter, but yeah, we discussed this a while ago.
Okay.
Does that conclude your comments, Randy?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, but I think it'd be good to re-explore that as part of the 5 big moves. I do remember that a couple of years ago, but I think that could throw off a lot of the projects if that would take away from our historically excluded communities south of the 8 to include seniors as an indicator for social equity. I think
they're all in terms of the modeling, they're all done separately. So it's not that they get all bunched together. They're
that's
separate.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
I do remember that ability to isolate that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Moreno. Appreciate it.
No problem. And being that the Zoom webinar chat function is not open to the general public, I do want to call on Rosina Lizárraga. You made a comment, and if you could just say it out loud so that members of the public could hear what you're saying, I think it's very important.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and I'm glad that, we can always mentioning seniors as a part of those performance measures and how the consideration will be for that population. There are several concerns because I mostly work with that group and within that age range. And most of the concerns that the performance measures are dedicated to people who work and travel and commute every day. And it's not completely aligned with, because they have ability to move and commute in a certain limits other than just going to doctor's appointment and recreation areas. So it was mostly focused and people that work and commutes every single day and displaced from our populations that work in our area that sometimes they have 2 jobs and it's mostly laborers. So it's most likely that they don't feel necessarily aligned with the goals that they have with this transportation justice and equity. So in regards to the food desert that National City is being identified since many years ago about that, and the inventory that Mr. Pollard is mentioning, it will be interesting to know how these inventories for the actual infrastructure in the city will be surprised, and some of the communities that have no infrastructure to be inventorying. So it'd be nice to have that component for another goal into how we're gonna measure it and reflect it on that measure guideline that we were presented today. We will be surprised how those infrastructure will be impacting the resident behavior and commuting, and also how they react to this infrastructure placement on their cities currently. That's my point of view. Thank you, thank you, Chair Moreno.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. And thank you for coming on live and speaking. And I would encourage other members to please raise your hand or turn on your video if you want to say any comments regarding this particular item and your neck of the woods. It's very important that staff hear from you. This is your opportunity. I don't see anybody on camera or anybody's hand raised. I don't see any comment. I don't see any hands raised from the public. Clerk, do you see any?
Claire,
Yeah, I see some.
Claire has a camera up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. Go ahead.
No worries. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thank you, Sam, for this great presentation. I really appreciate the social equity piece being pulled out. I think that was kind of mentioned earlier in the conversation that that would be helpful to have in all these presentations. You did kind of touch on it related to food, and I was curious if food access is ever being considered in this, and if that's been a part of the discussion, and potentially is there a possibility to include it as maybe one of the performance measures in this?
So it was discussed. There was kind of requests to look at particular types of retail to see if we could look at access to those into the future. The challenge being that we don't know how that's going to change as far as what currently might be a supermarket in a neighborhood today may be something very different in 10 years, let alone 30 years. So because of that limitation, we've gone away from looking at that into the future on this one. That can be part of the existing conditions of identifying currently where there are challenges of food deserts, for instance. But as far as forecasting that with performance measures, we're limited on the model.
Does that conclude your comments, Claire?
Yes, it does. I mean, I would love to see that included. I understand that there are limits to, to what we can assess, but I would encourage that to continue to be a part of the discussion.
Wonderful.
And just remembering, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but that we are talking about the performance measures for the CMCPs. So I think sometimes, we're having conversations, maybe we're forgetting that, that the regional plan and what we do there and the CMCPs, they're related, but they're not entirely the same. So there's some things that can be done in one that can't be done in the other, but that the CMCP teams will be looking at, we can pass on this information and make sure that they're, contemplating how they can do in their existing conditions, which they're working on now, to incorporate those ideas.
Wonderful. Thank you for that reminder, Jane. I see Lisa's video on.
Yes, I think Jane started to hit something that I was going to ask, is that how does this influence or impact the 5 big moves and other things, right? And investments, because I think part of what some of us are saying is that in order to move forward appropriately, I think we have to understand and have it reflected and be out there as to what has or has not happened in the last 10, 15, and 20 years. And I think that helps to guide in planning and measuring a lot of things, is being able to understand the deficits that I think Barry and I keep bringing up, is that, what kind of measurement is happening there, and that it's being related to anything to move forward, and a prioritization of investment, because that really is going to begin to impact how we engage with the community. And the support behind the 5 big moves is that, when we see things that, and the RTP, when you see things citywide, how much of it is trickling into the communities of concern. So we get lumped into these conversations and these investments. But San Isidro's 13 miles removed, and I can tell you how much of it gets to San Isidro. Not a whole lot. We all know that. And San Isidro is not the only example of that. And so what is measurement and data and planning with, how do we pull out information so that we see exactly how much of the planning is going to filter into those communities specifically, and what are the valves that are going to force that and make it really clear what's happening, not happening, what happened for the last 20 years. Thank you.
That's a great question. I'll put in my thoughts, and then Jane, anything else you want to add? So as far as big structure kind of question, so the CMCPs, they're going to be more detailed than the regional plan because they're going to be more focused on a smaller geography. I mean, some of these geographies are still pretty large, bigger than some of the incorporated areas, but they're still smaller than the region. So we can get into finer detail as far as what are the existing conditions, looking at current condition maps, and then also with many of the performance measures, we can actually make a kind of a spatial representation of what the anticipated future effects are. So we can start seeing, within the planning area, how travel is going to change, how travel time, delay, but also some of those other measures that we're keen on as well, as far as investments in different communities. And that's what we're really trying to push on with this plan. Because these are smaller, we're able to leverage that and go a little bit further. The 5 big move concepts are really everywhere within these. So it's within Sandag planning staff. We have teamed up with Caltrans planning. We're co-leading this effort. And then also the jurisdictions are coming on board with their planning staff, and we're working through how best to address this. And again, they'll come up with different alternatives and then share that information of how those alternatives perform. And that's when others can kind of weigh in and say like, hey, I like this one because it performs great in performance measure X, Y, and Z. And you have the information there to really defend that position as well. And it's kind of laid bare as far as what those alternatives are anticipated to result in, to really inform that conversation. So I hope that helps answer your question, Lisa. Yeah. Jane, anything else?
No, I agree, and it's complicated because there are actually 12 corridors, and these studies can't all be done simultaneously. So they need to be done in some based on certain criteria in certain order, and so we don't. It's at the same time we're developing the vision and doing this at the same time. So it's so as they're getting completed, they're informing, but as Sam said, at a conceptual level, the 5 big moves is being incorporated into the way that the corridors are being developed.
Thank you, Jane. We're going to move on to Rosina Lizárraga.
Thank you, Chair Moreno. I just wanted to add to what I was explaining before, and the early conversation. Since 3 years ago, we just touched this performance measure and how the goals will be stabilized. So in all these 3 years, we've been having like key components that we've been learning from each other's leadership and or reviewing what is needed in our communities of concern. And some of the topics that has been always been based on is on community sense of safety. So not all the communities has the capabilities of having some features on the city, like a language topics and simple things like I don't know, you guys recall that we have no tsunami signs anywhere in our communities of concern. Some of the type of infrastructures that are not placed in communities of concern that are really having an access and having those sense of sense in your community. I don't know if the word touch and the performance measures, how do you measure the safe of sense in the community when it's in regards to transportation, or how to like evacuation routes and all those topics that makes you and creates the sense of safety in your own community, and how do you want to measure that?
So I guess two parts to that. One, we really wanted to tackle the safety concerns. You know, it has implications far and wide. Again, this is one of the ones where we're just limited by the model as far as that perception of safety, actual safety, looking at observed data of safety incidents in the past, how to carry that forward. You know, we're tripped up on how to accomplish that. But as far as when it comes to transportation infrastructure and safety, we do have a measure on vulnerability. And by that, we're looking at areas that are going to be vulnerable to sea level rise, flooding, the cliff erosion, subsidence. I'm trying to think of some of the other areas. Oh, excessive heat. And originally I was thinking like excessive heat, that doesn't really, why does that matter for transportation? But then it was explained to me that there's other pieces where you have the binder and asphalt, it can get too warm and become soft, and that can have safety implications for the traveling public. So there's all these other pieces that come into it. So in that aspect, we're able to map where those areas are, and then also look at population and also the planned transportation solutions, where they are relative to those vulnerable areas. So that's one area where we can kind of get to where you want us to go, Rosina, but I acknowledge we're not all the way there.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And I'm sorry, Jane, did you want to add anything?
No, just I was going to say that you know, we can't. I think the whole process, if you know, as you saw in Sam's presentation of having policy considerations and then, you know, pulling, having one or two measures for those policy considerations, it's always good to keep in mind that we can't measure everything. And so, you know, so that's why that discussion is so critical in making sure we're measuring things that are going to give us solutions, or they're going to give us data points that are going to help inform those decisions about the alternatives for these corridor scenarios.
Thank you for that. Randy?
Thanks, Sam. A quick question, or two quick questions. When we say comprehensive multimodal corridor plans, we're also referring to the complete corridors. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that would bring in the concept of complete corridors from the 5 big moves, but that comprehensive multimodal, we wanted to make sure that very clearly this is not a corridor plan as in the past that was, you know, highway focused. We're looking at, yes, we do include the highways, but we are looking at parallel and perpendicular local and arterial roads, the transit system, rail systems, like everything is included in that comprehensive piece.
Okay, good to know. Okay, so complete corridor would be considered one that provides for all transportation modes, right? The complete corridor is kind of like an outcome, whereas this is the name of this process to study the corridors. Okay, and then the other quick question was, who are the comprehensive multimodal corridor plan steering committee members?
So for that, I don't have the list in front of me, but essentially it's leaders from SANDAG, Caltrans, from local jurisdictions, kind of help inform the process as far as how this is going. And I do want to focus on that just for a second, because the idea being that these plans are helping position the San Diego region so that when complete, we'll be able to be competitive for outside funds. So yes, we had an item earlier on Transnet funds and local funds, but where possible, we want to be able to compete nationally and statewide for other transportation dollars. And that's what these CMCPs are getting us ready for, that we'll have identified projects, we'll have a process in place that we can lean on and say, hey, we went through a very rigorous process to identify the best possible transportation solutions. And now, you know, we'll seek out the funding agencies for those. So really, that's been the focus of that alignment with the 12 policy consideration areas and then the performance measures nested within there.
And then each of the corridors has their own stakeholder working groups that are working on that corridor, right? So there's some continuity in terms of the performance measures so that there's sort of apples to apples, at the same time making sure that each of the corridors has its uniqueness associated with that, right? And we're hoping that the CBOs, the ideas that the CBOs that are in those corridors are connecting with those teams and participating and supporting that corridor.
That's the first I've heard that there's stakeholder working groups for each of these corridors.
They're developing them. This is in the front end of the
Oh,
process. Yeah. Yeah.
that's good. Okay.
So I'm not sure if you were here at the last meeting when they were giving the overview of the CMCPs. So today is a follow-up because the working group wanted to know more about the performance measures, in particular the social equity elements of that. But we had a presentation at the last meeting. But we can follow up. I'll give you some.
No, and thank you. This is why we asked, right, for this particular item to come before the CBO working group more in depth, because this will have an impact on each individual region. I have a few questions. So we have 12 CMCPs. Who will choose which CMCP SANDAG will focus on first, or second, or third, or fourth? Or are they all going to come live simultaneously?
I know so we're in round 1 with the current 5, and those were, I think, board selected. They requested that these ones go earlier on. As far as if we're going to have a second and a third round, I am not familiar if we're going to try and get the next 7 in the next round. I see Rachel has just popped on. She might have an answer to that.
Pam, before we turn on to Rachel, if she would like to comment, can you address which for the body, which are the 5 that were selected by the board?
So we have essentially the 78 corridor, which goes 67. So it's east-west in North County. It goes all the way, 76, 78 into Palomar Airport, kind of on the western side.
Okay.
We have the 67 corridor. We have the 52, and I'm using the highway names just because that's easier for me to rattle off than the full names. We have 805, which actually goes from the border a little bit past downtown, a little bit north of downtown, and then we have the Central Mobility Hub itself.
Okay, wonderful. And I think we're having a chat on the side as to what's the timeline, who goes first or who goes second, and so I thank you for that. To the board, we have 9 minutes left to this meeting, but I do want to once again reiterate, you guys are a working group meeting. We can communicate whatever you'd like to the board. So just let that simmer a little. And are there any other comments or questions on this particular topic?
Just wanted to, Rachel Kennedy is actually the CMCP coordinator for SANDAG for all of them. So she might have some clarifications that'll help kind of wrap this up.
Sure, I was just going to mention that the timing of the CMCPs was decided by the board when they took action last September on the budget amendment where they added the funding for the effort. They laid out the schedule for when the different CMCPs would be occurring. So we have the phase 1, the 5 that Sam just noted that are currently underway, and we will be having a phase 2 more in the fiscal year 23 and 24 timeframe, where we'll be addressing the remaining corridors.
Wonderful, thank you for that. Are there any other comments or questions from our panelists? I don't see any.
Actually, Chair Moreno, yes, actually, I'd be interested if you'd be willing to entertain a motion to encourage staff to include the community-based organizations in the stakeholder working groups for each of these comprehensive multimodal corridor plans.
We beat you to it. We beat you to it. We're already assuming that.
Okay, good.
The body has spoken though, and we want to formalize, or at least there's a motion on the floor that I want to make sure that we're respectful of. So if there's a second, we could
I
definitely.
would second. This is Lisa from Casa.
Lisa, so we have a motion on the floor with the second. And if there isn't any other discussion, Jane, would you please take roll call?
Yes. Yeah, who was the second, Lisa?
Yes.
Okay. Craig Jones, Alliance for Regional Solutions.
Approve.
Rose Ceballos, Bayside Community Center. You may have dropped off. Lisa Cuestas, Casa Familiar.
Approved, or yes.
Randy Van Vleck, City Heights CDC.
Approved.
Brenda Lee Rodriguez, Chula Vista Community Collaborative.
Approved.
Carol Lewis, El Cajon Collaborative.
Approved.
Ana Ardon, National Latino Research Center.
Yes.
Nile Sisters Development Initiative, Elizabeth Liu.
Yes.
Claire Goebner, Olivewood Gardens.
Yes.
Faye Seligman and Semahan Health.
Yes.
Barry Pollard, Urban Collaborative.
Yes.
And Erica Leary, Vista Community Clinic.
Yes.
Okay, excellent.
So,
okay, sorry, it's yes, it's there's one group missing, Bayside Community Center, but unanimous.
Wonderful. Okay, so motion does pass unanimously. And just for the record, I didn't see anybody from the public with their hands up or that I saw. So we are actually, just so you guys know, item number 7 is a very important item. And so I'm going to be tabling that for the next meeting. We've had a robust discussion here on the 2 items we're listening to, or that we listened to today. And just to add, for those folks who are not familiar with what AB 805 is, and how it changed things in SANDAG, we are going to have just a very small kind of introduction to AB 805 before we go into the pollution reduction strategy approach. And that's for the next meeting. And so let me see here in my notes. So here we go, possible topics for next meeting, including item number 7. The other item that we are going to be discussing is equity in the RTIP. So please get ready to have comments and questions regarding that item. Do we have any other suggestions for possible topics for future meetings?
Chair, we will also be in a position to seek input from the working group on the operating system, the NextOS, and equity issues related to the operating system.
Okay, wonderful.
Yay!
Any other working group members? Always feel free to reach out to me individually if you want to add any item to our to any of the future meetings.
And that one on the we'll have some material that you'll need to review before the meetings to help the discussion.
Wonderful.
I thought I was muted, you guys. You guys weren't supposed to hear that. Yay.
We'll take it. Today we'll take it. I don't see anybody in the public with their hands raised. I do see a working group member, Carol Lewis. Your video is on. Would you like to make a comment? Or do you have any questions? Nope. Okay.
No comment.
And I'm thinking Randy's was from before.
Yes.
Correct.
That's correct. Sorry.
No
Go
worries.
ahead. Ms. Carol Lewis, we can't hear you. You're muted and your camera is off now.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't have any comments, but it has been a really interesting discussion today. So thank you, everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I don't see any comments from the public, clerk, just to verify.
Yeah, I do not.
Okay, wonderful. Well, the next working group meeting is scheduled for Thursday, December 3rd at 10:30 a.m. Do we have any questions or comments from the one last time working group members? No? Okay.
Randy, does Randy have another topic?
No, I didn't. I lowered my hand. Yeah, I'm not sure why it's.
Yeah, okay. Tracy thought you would have, yeah.
Any questions or comments from the public? And so seeing none, thank you for making the time today. Thank you for the spirited discussion. We want to hear from everybody on this working group. So I thank you guys for voicing your opinions today. And thank you to staff. And we are officially adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.